Hello everyone, my name is Dean and welcome back to week 6, part 2 of the 20 and 20 challenge. Previously in part 1, if you guys missed it, we created a basic game review application that had images. The games were sorted into genres and we were just displaying all the genres on the front page. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to take those games that are in those genres and we're going to give you a drop down for both selecting a genre type. So you might select all as your genre, or you might select like RPG, or you'll select, action, adventure, whatever, your game genres. Then we'll also create a drop down that allows you to order these game results. So let's say I want to take a look at all of the games and I want to sort them all by the highest rating first. So, I might see Minecraft in spot 1, RuneScape in spot 2, and then all the way down at the bottom I might see Fortnite. I'm kidding, of course, please don't cancel me. But that's the basic premise of what we're doing. We're also going to clean up some stuff and make some of the links look better. We're going to change how the images are being shown on the screen and how they're being resized, and a couple other things. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Let's go ahead and let's jump into some code. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come into our gem file, and we're going to start off by uncommenting this gem, the image processing, because we're going to be doing a little bit of that later. So we'll just go ahead and uncomment that, save it, and then we'll run a bundle command. I'll just run it a second time just to make sure. And the other part of this is you should make sure that you have the image magic installed. So for this, we're going to use sudo apt-get install image magic with a K. And basically what's going to happen then is you'll see the prompt for the installer. You'll have to hit Y to continue, and that should work. If you're on a different system, you can find the Image Magic website off Google, and you can probably find something that's compatible with your system. Or you can just skip the part where we create the thumbnails and use some CSS for it if you want to. And then once you deploy to production, so like put it on an actual server, you're probably going to be using Linux there, and then you can just install Image Magic on your production environment. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, let's come into our app, views, games, and our index.html. And we're going to have to move all of this stuff down for now. We're going to be moving this over into its own partial in a minute here, but we're just going to start up top. So the first thing we're going to do is create a container for our search functionality. And if you're wondering how I did that tab completion, if you go into File, Preferences, Settings, and you search for Emmet, and then you scroll down, you'll see this Emmet trigger expansion on tab. I have a video covering that. I'll put a link to a card up in the top right for how I configured my Visual Studio Code for you guys. Now we're going to start with a form tag. So we'll say form_tag. And this is going to be for the games search path, which we haven't created yet. And we're going to set remote true because we're going to be using some Ajax here. And then we're going to say do outside of the parentheses. And then down here, we'll just say end. So if we were to, I think if we try and save this and refresh, it should already yell at us because, well, first the server's not running. And then it should yell at us for trying to use a path that doesn't exist. So hopefully we can get this to refresh. Yeah, there we go. So undefined local variable or method games search path. Did you mean games path? No, I meant the games search path. So if we come into our config and our routes.rb, just below the root, we can say post to the games/search. And that should fix up this error for us. So that's good. Now we just have to actually put some stuff inside of this form tag. So let's start by creating a field. A field. And then inside of this, we'll say, we'll create a label tag for the genre. And we'll just give this the label of genre : space. And then if I save, that'll tab over. And then we need the actual select tag for this. So we'll say select tag for the genre. Genre. Now I think you could also just put a string here for this genre like this, but then when you try to access it, it's going to be a capital G and we don't want that. So I think just using this will work just fine. And then we need an options from collection for select. which is kind of a mouthful, but bear with me. Inside of this, we'll use @genres. So because we're using the options from a collection for the select, we need the actual collection, which is our @genres. We're then going to use name and name. This is going to be what we display in the dropdown as well as what gets sent to the controller. So you have a couple options here. You could like show the name but send the ID, or you could show the ID but send the name, or you could like show the ID, send the ID. So here we're just using double names because we want to be able to say like if genre.name is equal to the past parameter string, which is equal to, I don't know, like RPG, then, you know, get the RPG games, for example. So that's sort of what we're going for here. So that's why we're using the name, and then we're going to set the default to be 0, which we'll deal with in a second here. So we don't have a 0th element right now, but what we can do, so there's a couple ways to do this actually. You could do something like a include blank, and then just call this all, and this would just include a blank option at the top of the dropdown. So if I save this, you'll see the Ruby code's broken here, but you'll see how at the top here we have this all option, which doesn't actually mean anything. And when you submit this, this all option is just going to be empty. We're not really looking for that. We kind of want to check for quite literally the all string. So the string with the word all in it. And you could do that a couple ways. We're going to try and do it a bit of a, I don't know if this is unconventional, but it's certainly not the most optimized. We're going to cast this to an array, and then we're going to call .unshift, which is going to allow us to prepend this element to the beginning of this array from so our collection's converted to an array, and then we're throwing something into the 0th position in that array. And we're just going to create a new genre element, and we're going to call it, or give it an ID of 0 and a name of all. So this is going to have the same effect as that include blank. We're just doing it in a slightly different way and allowing ourselves to pass in this all string right here. So if I refresh this page, basically nothing changes here, as far as the user can tell. But we sort of understand what we're doing here, so you know, it's the small changes that usually make your life a little bit easier. We're then going to create a label tag for the order, because we also want to be able to sort the games in a specific order. We'll just say game order. And then we'll need another select tag for the order. And for this one, we'll use, instead of options from collection for select, we're just going to pass it some options for select, because we don't have a @orders that we could use here. So instead we have to sort of create these. And here, how we sent this into an array and did this unshift, that sort of clues us in that another option we can do here is just use an array. And then pass in whatever options we need after that. So let's go ahead and let's try this. We'll create an array, and we'll say the first option is A to Z, because we want sort of the default to be alphabetical. Then we also have Z to A. We'll also have like highest, well, maybe not score. We could go highest rating first. Lowest rating first. And then we could do like newest first and oldest first. And you could include a couple others here. I'll show you how we sort of filter through all of these. And it's really not that complicated to do this. But if I come down here after this square bracket, include my parentheses, add a comma, we can then include a blank for this one so that you guys can see how to also use the include blank. And we'll just say include a blank that says order. So if we refresh this page, we now have this game order right here that allows us to select any of these options. And you can see Grammarly in the background being a pain as per usual. We do also need to move this. So if I look at this page, the genre is on a different line than the rest of this stuff, and that's because it was in a different field. So let's just move this below everything else and then save it. and this should push everything into one line. So the last thing we need here is just a submit tag. So below this, we'll just say submit tag, and we'll call this like search. We're not technically doing any searching here, but you sort of get the idea. Although I guess we are filtering a little bit, so who knows. But that's basically it for this little drop down here. So we have like RPG, we can say sort by lowest rating first, we'll hit search, and then down here in the terminal we'll get an error for a number of reasons, but the first one is we don't have this search action in our controller yet. But before we actually do that, let's move around the genres here, or I guess the games. So we'll create a div with an ID equal to genres, and we'll just close this. And then in here we'll just say render the game/genres, and we'll save this. So we can cut all of this out, save it one last time, and then we'll create a new partial here that we'll call _genres.html.erb, and we can go ahead and we can open that up. So the first thing we want to do here is create an H1, and we want to start off by saying link to like the genre name, and then we want this to go to the root path. And then we can close the H1. We'll then need a div with an ID equal to games. Although I'm not actually sure if we're using this right now, but oops. It's always good to sort of build out something that you can use later. And then in here we'll just say for each of the games do, and then we'll just create an individual game that we can use. And then for each of these we'll say, okay, so if the game has a thumbnail attached, then that means it has an image we can use. Else, it doesn't have an image we can use, and then end. And we're just doing this in case there is no image, so we don't get an error here. So if there is an image, we'll link to an image tag. So this is the part of the link that's normally the text, but here we're using an image tag, which will let us link to the specific game by clicking on the image. So we can say image tag game, and then instead of saying game.thumbnail, let's do a resized thumbnail, which is why we did the image magic stuff. And then outside of this, we'll say link to the game itself. So we do need to actually create this resized thumbnail method, and for that we'll come into app, models, and the game.rb. And then in here below the has one attached, we'll just say def resized thumbnail end. And we just need to return the thumbnail.variant. And we'll give this a resize of 240 by 135. And if we include the exclamation here, it'll just say this has to be 240 by 135. And there's no exceptions to that. So it can't be taller or shorter. It will force it to like respect this aspect ratio. So for 240 by 135, basically all I did was I said, okay, I want them to be 16 by 9. So let's multiply each of these by like 10. So 160 by 90. And then I said, okay, that's a bit too small, so let's double it. So 320 by 180, and I was like, okay, well, it's still a little bit small, so let's try doing, let's do like 3 times, so what would that be, like 480 by 270, and then I said, okay, well, maybe, because the 270 looked okay to me, maybe we can just divide this by 2, so then I went 240 by 135. So I was just playing around with numbers that sort of looked right to me until I found something. This wasn't something that I looked up, it was just trial and error, basically. But that gives us our game.rb. So now we can come back into our genres.html, and we can handle the case where there is no image attached. So if there is none, we'll just create a blank style for now where we force a empty div by 135 pixels. And this is not the proper way to do this, but it does give us something to prototype while we work on this. So I say link to the game title and then link to the game itself. And then if we refresh this page, we now have the genre name up here. And you can see here, this is sort of why we did this, because we already apparently have a blank game. So I'm assuming this was the first one we made before we added even the genres apparently, but the images themselves. So this one should really have more information, and ideally we would come into our game and we would say validates title length to be at least 5, or the presence true. And then it needs to have a thumbnail attached. But for right now, this is good enough. It won't error out, and it allows us to continue building out the application. But okay, we now have the genres built out. Let's actually make it filter something here. So we'll leave this genre name for now, and we'll just come into our controllers, and we'll be back here to fix this in a little bit. So let's come into our games controller. And this is sort of where a lot of the magic happens. So we already have this before action set genres. That's good. But we're not going to be doing @games equals game.all anymore. Instead, what we want to do is we want to make it so that if we visit the index page, we're doing the same sorting action as whatever the default is for the genre. Because if we set this to always sort by the highest rating first by default, we want that to happen for both if we go to the search page or to the index page, and we don't want to have to duplicate some logic. So what we'll do here is we'll create the search action. So say def search end and the index action right above it, just so we can keep these straight. And we'll just create a method here. We'll say set games and genre with criteria, which I know is a long mouthful, but we're given the params for the genre from our genre select tag, and we're also given the params for the order. So what we can do is we can say, okay, in both the index and the search, we need to work with this genre param. If it's blank, we can handle that case in the case of the index. And if it's not blank, then we'll just down here say also pass in the params for the order. And then for the default order here, we can just leave this blank, and this will be dealt with, or we could do something like params order as well. But it's really going to depend how you want to handle these cases. So I'm just going to do this so that things look a little bit different, so it's a bit easier to process which one you're looking at, but ideally you just leave both of them the same. So once we have this done, the next thing we need to do is we'll come down to our... Well, we'll probably have to do some permissions here, but we'll come down below the set genres and below the game params, and this is where we're going to create this function that we just declared. So we'll say set games and genre with criteria, and it's going to take in a requested genre and a requested order. And you could include your business logic either in your model, so inside of your game.rb, or you could even create something inside of your lib. It would then need to be inside a module, and then at the beginning you would just have to require import the module. But for right now, we're just going to leave this in the controller so that it's a bit easier for anyone who's looking at this later to see what's going on. So we have two cases here. We have the case of, okay, we have a nil requested genre, right? So we might come here and say, I really just don't care if there's a param or not, do this one, right? Or we have something that says, okay, well, I need all the games, so just give me all, which is the option that we have here for our dropdown. So those two we can handle in one if statement, but then we also have the else clause, which says otherwise. We're not asking for no parameters. We're not asking for all. We're asking for a specific genre. So that's the one we can handle down here. So we'll say if the requested genre is nil, or the requested genre dot equal all, then we'll do this. So at genre name in this case is going to be equal to all. And this is the thing we can use in our view here. So in the genres.html, we can say, you know, just set the genre name to be the @genre name. And then we can save this. And then if the other thing we have to do is we have to set the games by the genre to be equal to game.all. So if we want all of the games, or if we didn't specify that we don't want all of the games, then just give us all of the games. Otherwise, we'll do what's down here. So the first thing we need is we also need to get the games here. So we'll say games by genre, and I need to actually fix this one up here because I totally butchered that. So for the games by the genre, we'll have to filter the games by the genre, and we'll pass in the requested genre. And this is a method we also haven't created yet. And in this case, the genre name is going to be equal to the requested genre. So the reason why we can't just, you know, set this at the beginning is because if we come to like the root path or /games, you'll have a different parameter. So you might get, you know, a /games to appear right here, or you'll just get all, and it's a little bit buggy. So you do need to actually check to make sure that you're using what you think you're using. But okay, we get the games, we filter them. Well, we're not doing that right now, but we will in a second. And then after we filter the games, we then need to order them. So step 1, get the games you actually want. Step 2, order them. You don't want to order the games first into like created at or whatever, and then, you know, get rid of some games, because then you're ordering games that you really didn't need to. So here we'll say for this, do the requested order and order these games. So this is our like the sort order that we want, and this is the stuff we want to sort or order, whatever you want to call it. So let's create this filter games by genre method or function. We'll say def filter games by genre. And this should actually be filter games by genre. And this is just going to take in a genre name, which right here is what we're passing in. So we have the genre name. So let's say @genre is equal to genre, and then we'll use find by name genre name. And then for this, we can just say, okay, well, we found the genre. So games is equal to if @genre.nil. So if this doesn't find anything, it's going to set @genre to be nil. So if it's nil, then return game.none, which is basically just going to be an empty active record. And then if it's not nil, then we can just say get the genre.games, because we have a couple cases to deal with here. We might be using all, we might be not passing in anything. Well, I guess we shouldn't get to that case, but you never know. So if those happened, then, you know, go for the genre nil. But what happens if we, we come in here and we say, okay, well, the genre we're looking for, oops, hello? Let me just refresh. So what happens if we say the genre we're looking for is equal to like test case 42, 61, 33, 79, or 76? That's definitely not going to exist as a genre. So we also need to deal with the case where we just get bad data from someone that thinks they're being funny by typing this in. So in that case, we'll also want to just set this to be equal to none, which will return an empty active record. And that's basically it here. Rails will handle returning all of the stuff we need it to. So the last thing that we have to do is we have to actually order the games. So for this, we'll say def order games, and we'll have an order that we want and a games that we want ordered. And for this, we can just say @games is equal to, and then we have a lot of options here because we included, how many did we include in this dropdown? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then technically 7 if you want to deal with any other edge cases. So for this, we're going to be using a switch case, and the syntax for this is case, and then the thing you're switching on. So we'll say case order, and then when it wants the highest rating first, I think is what we called it, right? Highest rating first, then do this, And then if it doesn't want the highest rating first, let's say maybe it wants the lowest rating first. Let me actually drag this down here just so that we can see both of these at the same time. So we also have a when for when we want the A to Z, or when we want Z to A. And then we also down here say when lowest or newest first, when oldest first, and then we'll also want like an else down here, and then we can end this. So if I save this, it should format this for us, and then we can deal with all of these. So when we want A to Z, we want to do _games.order by the title in ascending, because it's going to go from A to Z, so it's going to ascend to Z. And then we can just copy this down here, and for Z to A, we can say DESC, so just the opposite. And then for rating highest first, we'll say _games.order by the rating in ascending, or in descending, sorry. That makes more sense. And then for lowest, we'll say _games.order by the rating in ascending order. And then for newest, you should be familiar with this one because of all the blog posts you've probably created. So for this, it's created at DESC. And then for the last one, it'll be _games.order. And we want to create it at ASC. And then we also have this else down here. So we'll say else if none of these, so if we're past like the empty string, if we're past nil, or we're past just something that's bad data, _games.order title ASC. So the other option you could do is probably just put this at the bottom and then make it like overflow down here, but we're just going to do it like this. And I think that's, I might have had one too many ends there. It's probably going to be not happy with me. But I think that's about it for the actual ordering here. So now let's go through our logic. I'll just move this back up. We set the games by, or we set games and genre with the criteria. So we come into here and we say, is the requested genre nil, or do you want all of the games? Then, or all of the genres. Then get all the games, set the games by genre to be game.all, and set the genre name to be all. Otherwise, get the games by genre by filtering the games by the requested genre, and then set the genre name to be the requested genre. And I've said genre probably like 100 times this video. And then finally, we need to order the games by the requested order, and the games we're ordering are the games by the genre. In the filter, we set the @genre to be the genre.findBy, and if that's nil, set it to be game.none so that it's an empty active record. Otherwise, just grab the genre's games. And then for ordering, we have @games being assigned to these games sorted in the order that we requested them in. So if we save all of this, and then we come to our index.html, the one thing we need to deal with is when we hit submit. So if I refresh this, and hopefully there's no errors, you can see here that the title's already changed. So that's good. So I could say something like, hello, YouTube, and this should get put up here. But if we like click all and we order these, we're going to run into, I think, an error here, which is undefined method order games. That's not the one I was thinking of, but we can deal with that. We do still need to create the search.js.erb. And the reason for that is we need to deal with the Ajax portion of this request, because we are trying to do this without having to refresh the page. Okay, so after looking at this, I'm not actually seeing the error that I thought I was seeing. The only thing it's telling us is that there's no template found for the games controller search action. So it looks like I was just full of it. The only thing we do need to do now is come into our games folder, create a new file, and we'll call this search.js.erb. And for here, we're not going to be using jQuery for this. We're just going to use plain old JavaScript. So we'll say document.getElement by ID, genres, and then var games is equal to document.getElement by ID games. And I don't think we're using that one. But for the genres.inner HTML. We'll set this to be equal to a JRender for games/genres. And then I think that's about it for this search.js.erb. So let's come to our root path real quick. And we'll say, okay, I want to filter just the RPG games. That seems right. Just the action games. Okay. Adventure. Okay. Sandbox. That also seems right. And you can see our images are being forced to conform. And if I go to all, it's doing that. So now if I click on one of these, I'd like this link to not go to /genres/for, but maybe we can make this go to the actual search on here. So if I click on Sandbox, it goes to this URL. So how can we do that? Well, if we come into our show page, if I can find it, just above the notice or below the notice, we can do something like a image tag for the @game.thumbnail. And probably want to check if this is attached. So say if @game.thumbnail.attached. So that gives us a nice little thumbnail, but now let's come down to our genre container here. And when we have the link to the genre name, we can set this to be like the game's path, and then we'll just pass in the genre.name. So this is also going to pass in a parameter for us, and it's just going to pass in the name of the genre, which we already have set up in our index as the select tag. So it's going to work exactly the same, hopefully. So if I come in here to games/2, and this one is not being forced to conform, so you can see this one is massive. But if I click on Sandbox, it'll take us to /games/genre equals sandbox. Or I can change this to test, or I could change this to RPG, and that'll work just fine. But I don't know if, oh yeah, it looks like lowercase RPG will redirect to uppercase RPG, so that's good. But yeah, that is basically everything I wanted to cover in this video. I know this is a bit of a longer one, but hopefully you guys got some value out of this. So if I go to all and I sort this by Z to A, you'll see SRM, that makes sense, and then A game is first. And you'll also see that A game is being rendered here without anything else appearing. So, or without any errors appearing, I should say. But yeah, so that's basically it for this one. I just wanted to cover some of these things because I thought they might give you some value. But let's go ahead and let's cut to the outro. Whew, okay, so that's going to do it for part 2 of this week's 20 in 20 challenge. If you're interested, part 3 will probably make this look a little bit better and add some more functionality, but I'm not really sure what the plan is for that. I still have to do all of that tonight. I also have a couple other things that I have to do, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. If this video helped you, remember to like this video. If this video didn't help you, remember to dislike it so we don't subject other people to more bad tutorials. And if you want to see more of these, you know, consider subscribing, hit the bell, and all that other YouTube crap that people throw at you. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. I will see you guys in part 3 or whatever video ends up coming out next. Have a good day, and thank you so much for watching.